Hi, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about gun control. So, if you're into that kind of thing, and if you're into controversy and leaving comments and all that stuff, please feel free to stick around because it's going to get heavy. Here we go. Now, I will remind everybody, both liberal and conservative, that the Second Amendment is there for more than just hunting. It exists for a very specific reason. Now, I'm going to address the liberals out there. How much do you really worry? How much have you thought that, someone like Trump might come along and, bring about martial law and a tyrannical government? Well, this is why the right to bear arms exists in the first place, for the creation of rebel militia if the time ever comes where the nation has to fight off its government. It's happened in many other governments throughout history, so America really isn't exempt from this. Now, what it doesn't do, despite popular liberal belief, is suggest that mentally unstable people should have access to firearms. So the second part of this series will focus on some ideas that I believe would make all the difference, and maybe even stop some of these atrocities from occurring in the first place.
Tonight, the teenage gunman who has destroyed so many lives here shuffled his way into the courtroom.
Are you Nicholas Jacob Cruz?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sir. You are charged with 17 counts of premeditated murder.
He is fully aware of what is going on, and he's just a broken human being.
Cool Springs Police wants to evacuate approximately 40 students from Building 8.
America is left to grapple with the consequences of another mass shooting in a school.
I have the gunshot victim. He's by the entrance to Westglades on the west side of the school.
Other pupils were hiding under desks and in cupboards. Some teachers defending students with their bodies and with their very lives.
I mean, here we are, and we're like the latest statistic on, on school violence. And as a society, as Americans, we're failing our children. We're not keeping them safe, and Congress is failing us, and the government is failing us, and something has to be done.
Cruz was a former student at the school with a history of disciplinary problems and with access to all the weaponry he needed. On his social media accounts, there were disturbing images of Cruz posing with weapons, a perfect storm of a young man with access to guns and harboring a grudge beyond comprehension. Earlier today, the president, a fierce defender of gun rights and the Second Amendment, made his first comments on the tragedy.
I want to speak now directly to America's children, especially those who feel lost, alone, confused, or even scared. I want you to know that you are never alone and you never will be. We are committed to working with state and local leaders to help secure our schools and tackle the difficult issue of mental health.
Now, of course, is the same backlash that you always get after a shooting. People debating back and forth what to do about guns and gun regulation, who's right, who's wrong. I know I have a strong conservative following, but I honestly think in this particular case we need to take a note from Obama. It hurts to say it, like almost burns to say, but a big problem here when it comes to gun regulation comes down to the NRA.
Why then do you and Hillary want to control and restrict and limit gun manufacturers, gun owners, and the responsible use of guns and ammunition to the rest of us, the good guys, instead of holding the bad guys accountable for their actions?
There have been more guns sold since I've been president than just about any time in U.S. history. There are enough guns for every man, woman, and child in this country. And at no point have I ever proposed confiscating guns from responsible gun owners. What I have said is precisely what you suggested, which is why don't we treat this like every other thing that we use? We used to have really bad auto fatality rates. The auto fatality rate has actually dropped precipitously, drastically since I was a kid. Why is that? We studied what is causing these fatalities using science and data and evidence, and then we slowly treated it like the public health problem it was, and it got reduced. We are not allowed to do any of that when it comes to guns because people, if you propose anything, it is suggested that we're trying to wipe away gun rights and impose tyranny and martial law.
While the government buys 1.6 billion bullets, armored vehicles, tanks, helicopters, Predator drones, armed, now in U.S. skies, being used to arrest people in North Dakota, the Second Amendment isn't there for duck hunting. It's there to protect us from tyrannical government and street thugs.
Do you know that Congress will not allow the Center for Disease Control to study gun violence? They're not allowed to study it.
How about Prozac? You know the number one, oh, that's the big sponsor, isn't it? Or that whole class of drugs.
Let me ask you a question.
Oh, whoa, got to cut that off, don't you? No, don't want to talk about the U.S. number one cause of death is suicide now because they give people suicide murder pills.
Calm down.
Your answer is give more money to the psychiatrists and psychologists to put more crazy people on drugs that make them kill people, Pierce.
Of mental health.
By studying it the same way we do with traffic accidents, somehow that's going to lead to everybody's guns being confiscated. When we talked about background checks, if you buy a car, if you want to get a license, first of all, you got to get a license. You have to take a test. People have to know that you know how to drive. You don't have to do any of that with respect to buying a gun. And when we talked about doing effective background checks, it was resisted because the notion was we were going to take your guns away. I just came from a meeting today in the Situation Room in which I've got people who we know have been on ISIL websites, living here in the United States, U.S. citizens, and we're allowed to put them on the no-fly list when it comes to airlines. But because of the National Rifle Association, I cannot prohibit those people from buying a gun.
So we do need tougher restrictions on guns, there's no question there. Most conservatives realize a cold, hard fact. Criminals are going to get guns, and without having one in our home, we are open to attack. Taking guns from responsible gun owners makes no sense, as they have no reason to have them taken away in the first place. We don't punish good drivers when other reckless drivers cause fatalities. It's the gun owners that are careless with their firearms who have them stolen, the result of which is unleashing yet another gun onto the streets. If a registered weapon wasn't locked up and was stolen, the gun owners should be held accountable and have their license revoked. Similar to a vehicle, if you don't report the car stolen and that car gets in an accident, the driver is liable if it's not reported. Leaving your doors unlocked and the keys in the ignition is usually a deal breaker in most insurance claims or courts. If the car owner made the vehicle accessible to criminals, then they would be held accountable for the damages. Most guns that are confiscated by police were originally purchased by a registered gun owner, irresponsible people that didn't bother securing them in a proper safe. But stolen firearms make up for only 20% of the firearms used in mass shootings. In other words, 80% of mass shootings are carried out by registered gun owners. But there are ways of correcting this problem. Psychiatric screening should be mandatory during the licensing process, and no gun license should be obtained without a prescription from a reputable psychologist, which should be repeated annually if the gun owner wants to renew their license. Licenses should be temporarily suspended when psychiatric drugs are prescribed by a doctor, and all firearms temporarily stored in a government facility until completion of the treatment is verified. A psychiatric evaluation should be completed to regain possession of their guns. The gun show loopholes should be closed indefinitely, and most moderate conservatives do agree. It's just the extremists that really do fight it. All firearms confiscated by the police from the streets should be incinerated almost instantly, ensuring that these firearms and guns and all these weapons don't end up back on the streets again. Any private sale of firearms to unregistered citizens should be punished to the full extent of the law, including any guns that cross over the borders, regardless of citizenship. Jurisdiction must come into play. It shouldn't matter if a smuggler is a citizen of Mexico, Canada, or any other country. If the law was broken on American soil, then they should face American justice. Similar to the stolen gun laws, these criminals should be charged with the potential of what these firearms were capable of doing. Now, no gun zones are a hotspot for gun violence. A known area where psychopaths are free to fire their weapons without fear of being shot back is a horrible, horrible idea. While children certainly shouldn't have to worry about guns in their schools, a no-gun zone is an open invitation to those looking to inflict maximum damage. We need more police presence at the outer perimeter of these schools and take away the no-gun zones altogether. So what to take away from this? Second Amendment, yes, we need guns. Do we need guns in the hands of people that are under heavy medication, or like certain medications that bring out the crazy in people? We certainly don't need that. So we definitely need more legislation when it comes to gun ownership and whatnot. Take away all the guns? Horrible idea. Criminals are criminals, and that's what a lot of people really understand, especially the left. Criminals are criminals, and they're going to get guns. So taking guns away from responsible people and just leaving the criminals with the guns? How does that make any sense? So as soon as all the guns are gone, all the registered gun owners no longer have their guns, what do you think that the average criminal is going to do? You're going to see crime spike like crazy because every criminal that has a firearm illegally now knows that they can break into any house and do whatever they want, and nobody's going to have a gun to fight them off. Do you see the problem here? It's also a problem in Canada, but we do have more tougher regulations when it does come to gun control, as opposed to places like England that don't have any guns at all. But for some reason, the mortality rate is just as much, so people are going to kill. So the best thing we can do is take the firearms, at least the machine guns and all that crap, out of the hands of people that are not mentally sound. So do you agree with my position on gun control? If you don't, if you do, it doesn't matter, I'd like to hear from you. I'm also open to any suggestions that you might have about future episodes. So if there's a topic that you want me to cover, I'm more than willing to look into it. Please tune in just a few days from now, where I will be releasing the third part of this series entitled Religion, Atheism, and the Separation of Church and State. Very important episode, so if you're into that sort of thing, please feel free to tune in. If you do like what I have to say, please consider supporting Politically Impaired by going to the Patreon account listed in the description below. If you feel like getting something back in return, there's also the Politically Impaired mug, which is on sale usually. There's also a phone case. I also have a baseball cap for sale that says Make America Sane Again, which I think is something we all can agree with. That's all I have to say for now, so thanks a lot for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Take care.